Okay, so I would like to welcome our listeners to another episode of Scoliosis Dialogues, the official podcast of the Scoliosis Research Society. And I'm your host for today. I'm Schoeneman Vorhies from Stanford, scoliosis surgeon and SRS member. And I am lucky enough to be joined today by Mia Rago, who is a musician and a former patient with scoliosis, who's going to talk to us today about some music that she has worked on that has a relationship to her history with scoliosis and all sorts of other great things. So welcome to the podcast, Mia.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So yeah, we're really pleased to have you. So I just wanted to ask you to maybe introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners. We got, as you know, we have listeners who are surgeons, and then we also get a lot of patients that listen to the podcast, and kids who might have just found out that they had scoliosis or might be at various different aspects of their treatment. So I'm sure they're really happy to hear what you have to say. So tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Chicago, or the suburbs of Chicago, Western Springs to be exact. But now I live here in Nashville. I went to school down here to study opera, and I just decided to stay. So I do sing some classical stuff, and then I also, like you said, write my own songs and do my own type of music.
That's great. Nashville's such an amazing place to be as a musician. Did you come there to play music and to be a musician, or did you kind of fall into it after you got there?
I definitely did come here to be a musician. Um, it's not called Music City for nothing, that's for sure. So it's been great kind of finding a good community and a cool community of musicians. I'm still taking voice lessons, that kind of thing, for classical. So I've found a good group with that. And also I've been very fortunate to be able to find a good group of musicians to record stuff with. So I recorded an EP back in 2019 when I was down here, released it in 2020, and then had kind of the same group of musicians record my latest project, which is my debut album, which is what this song, All of My Scars, will be on, which is kind of telling the story about my scoliosis.
That's so cool. So we're going to put links in our description on our webpage about how our audience can hear all of your music. I've been listening to it over the past few days, and it's really cool, and I think people will be happy to discover it. So to tell me a little bit about, if we can kind of put it into context for why you're on this podcast, tell me a little bit about your history with scoliosis.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed at 9 years old. Um, I remember we were on vacation and it kind of like almost happened overnight where I was walking in front of my mom and she kind of noticed my posture was a little off. So, at dinner, she's like, "Can you sit up straight?" And I was like, "I am." And clearly my shoulders were pretty uneven. Um, so she called the doctor while we were there. We went immediately when we got home, and he was just my, primary care physician, and he was like, "Yep, she's got scoliosis." We did some x-rays, and then he sent us to some specialists, and that was kind of when it, kind of started shopping it around and found out that, surgery was the option that I had. Um, and so we definitely saw a few surgeons before we landed on Dr. John Grayhack. And he's out of Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. So that's where I ended up having the surgery. And he was great. And, sometimes it felt like I was a little bit of a case study, like talking with some of the other surgeons and stuff. And just because I was so young for being diagnosed with it. But yeah, Dr. Grahak just made us feel very comfortable with everything. It was a 56-degree S curve. Um, so it was pretty severe right off the bat. I couldn't really, a brace wouldn't have really done much. So we just kind of decided not to even try something like that. So then when I was 10 years old on June 15th, I ended up having my first scoliosis surgery.
So, what did you know about scoliosis when you walked into your first appointment with an orthopedic surgeon? Do you remember like what you knew and what you thought?
Yeah, so I've been kind of trying to reflect on this whole situation, um, especially recently with my song and stuff. And I feel like I didn't know a whole lot, and some of the memories are like a little bit hazy because I was so young.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't really think I knew much about scoliosis, or I just kind of like heard it in passing because my mom was like, "Oh, I have a little bit of scoliosis, and this is why my back hurts sometimes," or stuff like that. But I never really knew the severity of it or how bad it could be, and that it was, you could have to have surgery for it. Um, so I wouldn't say like I always knew what was going on. I knew I had to have surgery. I was definitely a little scared at the time. Um, but I didn't know, my parents, and I kind of am glad I didn't know at the time all of like the things, you know, all of the details of the surgery. I was,
Yeah.
you know,
And so it sounds like your mom noticed it, which is a really common way for kids to be diagnosed, sometimes picked up by a pediatrician, sometimes by a family member. And did you feel anything about your back? Did you know that, like, did you have pain or did you feel unbalanced? Or did it bother you at all at that time?
I didn't feel anything. And looking back now at pictures, I'm like, how did I not notice? But it's just your posture. You don't really, I mean, there's plenty of people who slouch or something and they're like, sit up straight. And it's like, well, I don't, this is my posture. And so just like that, I feel like I just didn't notice that I was that crooked, or I also had the crankshaft, so I was like a little bit twisted. But I do remember we had before the surgery, we had to do some different tests and stuff like that, and we did a lung capacity test, and my lungs were below normal. So
Yeah.
that was kind of something that I kind of noticed. I, maybe was out of breath more, or little things like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where you're developing, right, and your body's changing so much when you're 9 years old, right? And so one of the changes is that you develop scoliosis, but is that any different than so many of the other changes that are happening? So it's hard to put that into context, I imagine.
Yeah, it was definitely felt just like a weird growth spurt at the time.
Yeah. So, what what can you do you have any advice that you can give people like me for how, when I'm talking to somebody who's just learning about this at 9 years old, like what was done well for you in terms of how you were introduced to it and what could have been done better?
Yeah, I feel like, um, yeah, I give a lot of, credit to my parents and to my surgeon. I feel like they didn't treat me like I was, really young, because I didn't want to be treated like I was like, you're too young to know this, because it's my body. I was the one going through it. And so I think they did a good job at giving me, you know, as much of a picture as they could. Obviously I don't think I needed to know everything that was going on, but definitely just the basics of, your spine is curved, this is what it looks like, not talking to me like I'm a child, because it is a very, severe surgery. Um, and I feel like that all gave me a better mindset going into it. And I was able to be a better patient then, hopefully after.
What about if you can give advice to somebody who was in your shoes or to yourself at that time, what would you want to hear?
that, everything's going to be okay. You're going to get through. I mean, as cheesy as that sounds, it's true. Um, and I was able to do so many other things that, without having the surgery, I wouldn't have been able to do. Um, and now I have the best posture, and I stand up very tall and straight, and I don't even have to try. And, I was still able to play sports and do everything. Like, there is a silver lining after it, and there is a life after the surgery that you have to look forward to.
Yeah, that's a great message.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so and you ended up with Dr. Grayhack, who's, a really important guy in the field. He's been involved in training a lot of scoliosis surgeons that I know, and, really well known, and so that's wonderful. And it sounds like you told me that you needed to have more than one surgery throughout the process. Is that right?
Yes, and that was something I don't feel like I really remember at 9 talking about, but my parents kind of seem to remember that kind of being a subject, but they were like, let's focus on this one right now, but because of her age, we don't want to fuse a lot of the vertebrae because she is still growing. But that could mean, that was the hope, was that the vertebrae that wasn't fused would grow straight then. But there was still a possibility that it could curve a little more. And that's what ended up happening once I got to high school. Um, so I remember it was like 2014, like in the fall, we went to go see Dr. Grayhack just for a checkup. And the bottom portion of my spine was starting to curve again. And it was getting a little bad. It was like, could be now, it could be years from now, but you might need another surgery. And I remember I just finished up, I was on the golf team in high school, which is another like crazy thing that I did not think I would be able to do with my back, but I can. And I was just finishing out the season and I was like, well, I want to be okay to get back into the season. So let's just do it now. So we did it, and it was a shorter recovery time than the first surgery. So it ended up being like, half of everything. So the first surgery, I was in the hospital for 7 days, this one for 5. The first surgery, I was out of a year of physical activity. This one, I was 6 months out of physical activity, which gave me time to work on my short game in golf,
Lots of putting.
which definitely helped. Um, so yeah, so in November, when I was 14, I had the second surgery, and that fused a little more of my spine.
So you weren't expecting that second surgery. So some people will have a planned first surgery and they'll know that they have another surgery down the road. But for you, you didn't necessarily expect to have a second round. Is that correct?
Right. I was a little in shock, like a little definitely upset. Um, and I feel like because I knew more about it by that time. It was kind of my I would always do like school projects or something, or like a research project. I would always pick scoliosis and do something about that. So by this time I knew much more than I did when I was 9. So I was just like, oh, I just don't really want to go through that again. But you
Were you
know,
more scared about the second time or the first time?
this was the second time. Yeah. I just feel like I knew a little more, and I knew, what I went through the first time. I was like, oh, don't really want to go through that again, but if I have to, it'll mean a better quality of life going forward, then yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy that you're telling the story about that specifically, because I think a lot of times, we tend to elevate and tell stories of people who had like perfect outcomes, who exactly how we all expected, but that's not always how it happens, right? Sometimes there's bumps in the road, but I think it's great for people to hear that you made it through and are having a very happy and successful outcome, even though it
Yeah,
maybe didn't go exactly how everybody had planned, huh?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I just feel like I was able to do so much more from having the surgeries, and it took me a while to come around to that because I mean, at first I was like, why do I, at 10, I was like, why do I, like, I'm not allowed to go in the pool right now because I can't do any physical activity, or like I can't go play with my cousins, or, what kid at 10 wants to not be able to run around and play and stuff like that. Um, but looking back on it, I mean, losing, a year of physical activity meant that I could, gain a lifetime of physical activity, I guess. Um, and I fit better into my clothes then. My clothes started not fitting at 9 because I was just so crooked, so uneven. Um, you know, and what they don't tell you too is that clothes don't always fit right after the surgery too, which I kind of had to come around to as well, and getting used to that sensation because it's like a new body almost. Um, so yeah, and it changes overnight, really.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so much about it, the whole experience it's not fair. I mean, you didn't do anything to deserve this. And it must have been a challenge to kind of come to terms with all that.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like another thing that got me through was my music. I mean, being out of the physical activity for that long, you can't really do much. So I did like a lot of like arts and crafts, and then I was able to do music, like, I was still able to sing and everything. So I just kind of kept that going, and right after my first surgery was kind of kickstarted me playing guitar, and then I started writing music. So I feel like that was kind of my silver lining coming out of that, was like, you don't need sports. I mean, you could still play sports if you want, but it definitely heightened the artistic side of my brain, and made me want to be a creative more, I think.
So were you already interested in music before you had this diagnosis and surgery?
Yes, I definitely was. I grew up singing, and listening to my dad sing. He sings like Frank Sinatra and the standards and all that. So I grew up with all that. Um, I started singing really young, and kept singing, and but then I feel like there was kind of like a shift around like my first surgery, and I was going into middle school, and once I got into middle school I was like, let me play an instrument, like, I want to accompany my voice. So I started playing guitar, and then yeah, started writing music, and then I was able to write even more music during my second surgery when I was kind of sitting out of stuff. Um, so yeah, kind of helped me lean into that. And then, I mean, a few years later, I didn't write my song about scoliosis until later, kind of maybe around like the 10-year anniversary of my first surgery. So in 2020, that would have been. Um, the 10-year was kind of difficult for me because I kind of feel like I shoved down all these emotions that were from my first surgery that I just didn't fully accept all the way. Like I didn't always like my scar. I always wanted to cover it up. I didn't like the way clothes fit all the time, and it kind of just all came to head the 10-year anniversary. Um, but I feel like writing music has been such like a therapeutic way for me to deal with things. So it just kind of felt right that, this song has come out of all of my experiences with scoliosis and kind of giving an honest and real look at my story and hoping that other people could relate to it, where it's, kind of it is what it is, and it's hard and it's not great, but in the end you're so much stronger, and it's just a part of you and your story, and you will come out on the other side, in a good way.
Yeah. Did you write this song? I mean, did you write this song for yourself, or did you write this song for other people, going through this, or what would you say? Who's this for?
Um, I definitely think at the time it was for myself, and I feel like a lot of my songs are like that, where in the moment, I'm like, this is for me, this is about what I'm going through right now. And then I kind of, turn it around and I'm like, okay, maybe this could also be relatable, and it's not too personal to the point where it's like, I'm listing dates in there when I had my surgeries and stuff. It's not like that. So I feel like, you know, it's after I wrote it, it felt like something that I could make more relatable for other girls and people going through it. Um, yeah, kind of giving them something to listen to and to connect to.
Yeah, there's a lot of the song that's I've listened to a few times. There's a lot of the song that's sad. I mean, it's a sad song,
It is.
but it's interesting, talking to you. You seem like a very happy person right now. But happy, I mean, I think it's art, and can come out of sad experiences and big experiences, even despite where you land.
Yeah, I mean the beginning of the song, starts with all of my scars, all of my tears gave me my pain and brought me here. And I feel like the here, like brought me here is what you make of it. So yes, it gave me some pain, but it also, I think I go on to say, it's my strength now. It's kind of like a hidden strength, I feel like too, because not everyone knows about it. And I mean, now they do, but you know,
I guess so.
yeah. But for a while it was like a hidden strength that I had, and um yeah, I just hope it could give other people strength. Even though it is a sad song, I like to think that there is a silver lining in it, that, it's kind of, even though all of these things happen, like there's still a silver lining to having scoliosis, and obviously being a part of this community now um is great.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it gave you an important experience, which you've now used to really to make some amazing art.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, you talked about doing a lung test beforehand, and understanding that your lung function was less than maybe would be expected of the average healthy 9-year-old. And then you talked about athletics, and a lot of people who have scoliosis and that I talk to about surgery are worried about being able to do the things that they love doing in sports and things like that. And I've taken care of some people who are singers, and they're worried too, because your lung function is so important as a singer. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, because I listened to some of the opera performances that you've done, and I understand that you're classically trained, and so much of that involves learning about how to breathe and use your chest. And so, like, how did the fact that you had scoliosis, influence that aspect of your training and your work?
Yeah, I definitely wish I would have paid more attention when I was 10 going through the surgery, because I do feel like there was just a huge overnight difference, obviously, because that was, I mean, the crankshaft was gone overnight, and most of my curve was then gone too. So it gave more room for my lungs to open up. But um, yeah, I mean, I feel like I wasn't, I almost feel like coming out of that, I wasn't breathing correctly until I got to high school and started, I was in choir more and kind of started just getting like very basic information on, breathing and posture and how this all relates to singing. And so I feel like I was breathing the wrong way for a long time
Hmm.
and breathing like up here, up in my shoulders rather than using my diaphragm to breathe. And I do kind of wonder if that stems from my scoliosis at 9, just like never truly, I mean, if I'm developing with the scoliosis there, I never really have a great way to breathe because of the scoliosis. So, but yeah, it does definitely opera singing requires a lot of breath. And
Yeah.
so it's definitely strengthened, um, throughout my high school career and college, then when I really started taking classical lessons and, now it feels great to be able to get through some of these like crazy phrases and all this stuff. But yeah, and I don't think I would have been able to do that if I didn't have the surgery or anything. So it's another good thing from that.
Yeah. No, you're doing some amazing things with your lungs.
Yes.
So what's next for you? What are you up to? What are you working on now?
So now I'm working on releasing this music that I have now. So I'm gonna do a bunch of release a bunch of singles this summer. So beginning with this song, All of My Scars, about my scoliosis, that will be released on June 14th. It's a Friday, 2024. And that is actually going to be the day before my 14-year anniversary for my first surgery. So it feels very good to have all of that kind of lining up there. And then it's June, so it's Scoliosis Awareness Month. Um, so yeah, I'm very excited. And then June 13th, I'll be at Laurie Children's Hospital, just kind of doing a little private performance there for some of the patients and, singing my song and then also singing some covers and maybe some of my other stuff too. Um, so yeah, and then songs will keep coming out this summer. So I'm really excited about everything coming up.
Awesome. Well, we are too. So we're gonna link to your webpage so our listeners can hear more of your music. And as we kind of close out, we're gonna give everybody a listen to your latest song, All of My Scars. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. Any closing messages you want to give to the people who are listening to your story?
Just honestly, just keep going. It'll get better. And, it took me, I feel like, a while to find this community, but I'm so glad I did. And um, I hope anyone else could find comfort in this song the way I have.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Been a pleasure talking to you, getting to know you.
All of my scars, all of my tears.